Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining our webinar, for our October webinar titled Brewing Change, Navigating Modern Challenges in a Century-Old Company. With me today, I have Stephanie Grubert and Roger Furman. Stephanie is your friendly guide with over 14 years in the e-commerce world. She's worn many hats throughout her career, from strategy planning, account management, to marketing, sales, and merchandising. Stephanie's journey has taken her through brands, retailers, and agencies, giving her a well-rounded perspective that's hard to beat. Since her Amazon days back in 2011, she's been riding the exciting waves of e-commerce transformation, helping teams come together during times of change. These days, she's leading up the e-commerce team at Tarani, where she's helping the beloved brand reach new consumers in exciting ways. Thanks for joining us, Stephanie. And then for Roger, with over 25 years of experience in global sales, business transformation, and strategic marketing, Roger is the Director of Strategic Sales at Northern Lights Technology Development. He assists businesses with friendly, scalable IT and business solutions with extensive experience in SaaS, CRM, and complex sales to create budget-friendly strategies that focus on what matters most, helping businesses grow. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you two, and let's talk about brewing change.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Well, first I want to preface it about how Steffi and I came to meet. It was at a conference in February last year where someone made the introduction and trying to understand. And while Stephanie and I were sitting down eating lunch together in a large room, she was going on talking about her experience at Tarani, working for over 100-year-old European company and the challenges she faced. And as we were talking, I thought this would be a great topic for us to discuss on a webinar to share some of her experience. So 5 areas that I thought we'd cover today is balancing legacy systems with modern retail technologies, of how she's handling that, evolving company culture while respecting tradition, maintaining brand identity through periods of change, as well as attracting top talent for those established brands, and then creating innovative customer experience through honor and brand strategy. So I'd like to start, Stephanie, by talking about, Tarani has such a long and successful history. And how do you decide which legacy systems to preserve versus to modernize?
Yeah, great question. I think that's honestly one of the things that not just Tarani being as old as we are, which it is, thank you, we're 100 years old this year, so it's been a big celebration year for us. But it's one of those things that I think any company can face, right? Like, you bought a new piece of technology or created something, and then with how fast technology moves this day and age, a year from now, 6 months from now, something else is out there, right? So for us, I think a lot of it is they tend to be cross-functional decisions. Multiple teams use all of our different tools and systems. So how do we decide as a team what to update? So what's the most business impacting thing? I think that's kind of the key. We're also a company that, while we're 100 years old and very well distributed, so we're everywhere and everyone knows who we are, whether or not who we are, believe me, you know who we are. It's one of those businesses that I think people assume we have a larger team than we do and more resources than we do. So it can be challenging, but we are, I think now we're only a team of 400 people total. That includes our manufacturing and warehousing teams. So we have to make very strategic and very careful decisions about what to keep in place versus what to update and integrate into new technologies. So it's a lot of, what is the most consumer impacting thing? What is the most team impacting thing? So thinking about our teams and where are we spending so much of our time doing manual processes and manual touch points that we could make easier and more efficient for our teams as our company scales and grows. So currently we're also focused on what's going to help us scale. Scalability is another key thing. And sometimes people want to just throw headcount at problems, but now we have been starting to ask a lot of questions more about, is this a people problem, a process problem, or a tools problem? And like checking off which box based on like which solution fits, right? So if it is a people thing, we need more people, that's the answer. But a lot of our legacy systems are very old. A lot of what we do is still Excel. So I think that's probably true with a lot of people. As much as we all like to think we're more technology savvy than we are, especially in the e-commerce space, I bet a lot of people are still working in Excel a lot. So, but mostly it's decisions cross-functionally, what's going to impact in a positive way the most people to make us more efficient for scalability. So that's what we
Yeah,
look at.
that's really good. And you've kind of segued into my next question here, where you talked a little bit about strategies and new retail technologies. And of course, it's harder sometimes to convince upper management for new technology that's going to help you accomplish A, B, and C, whether it's the new flashy fishing lure or a new LA Rams jersey, whatever it may be. But what's worked best for you? What strategy worked best for you when you try to integrate some of this new technology without disrupting the day-to-day? Because I know that's usually a big concern for leadership is, okay, you're going to do this, but then it's going to take a while to implement and get going. But
Yeah.
what strategy has helped you kind of overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, I think that we just went through a huge new technology implementation, and we moved warehouses this year. And I think that one of the biggest strategies, or like look backs and learnings that we've taken from that, is we need to have more contingency planning in place, because I think it's unrealistic to assume everything's always going to go off without a hitch and completely smooth. So I honestly think one of the strategies when planning for new tools and new systems is that contingency planning, and understanding that it doesn't matter how well you think you've thought it through and how timing the implementation and the rollout is the trainings and all the things, the pre-work to go into something like that. Most likely something's going to go wrong. So having a contingency plan and a realistic timeline with like a buffer built in will definitely help. That's what's been key for us. And, giving yourself the grace to make mistakes, especially if it's something totally new as well, I think is really crucial. But a project manager is going to be really key. I would say if you don't have a really solid project manager on or any kind of tool implementation or new rollout or switching from one older system to another, you really have to have somebody that can bring all parties together, because nothing is siloed. There's very few things where it's, oh, only the sales team touches that, only the marketing team touches that. Most likely the technology team is going to be touching it too, especially if it's a new system in your company. And there will be other people who are going to be needing access to it. So I think that, that project manager, that way they can bring stakeholders in earlier. They can make sure that people are aligned. That's a key piece of it. But again, having realistic expectations that nothing ever rolls out smoothly or perfectly. And you're probably going to have interruptions to the business, but how do you mitigate that as best as possible and have that contingency plan?
Yeah, and you talked about your teams and not only above managing up, but managing downward as well. How do you bring your teams along when implementing new digital tools and or those data-driven initiatives? It's hard to kind of get your team on board or have them feel like they're a part of the process, but how do you specifically do that?
That's a challenging one. We have, not just on my team, but at Tarani, we have a very tenured team. So some people who have been at Tarani for almost their whole careers or their whole career. So bringing them along with a new tool or system, we've spent a lot of time understanding that we need to be training people and training them really well from the get-go so that they feel comfortable with it. Lots of hands-on time, lots of demos. If we ever have a new system coming in, whoever we're purchasing that product from, or the SaaS or whatever it looks like, bringing in demos ahead of time. So we're sure that we're integrating with the correct platform, the correct tool, the correct company, etc. But just a lot of pre-work and a lot of trial ahead of time. And then again, I think it's really important to give your teams that grace and that learning time. There's going to be a buffer period before everyone's rolling at 100% again. So just understanding that adaptability and that change for people takes time. Think about any time you start a new company or a new job, wherever you go, you could be top of your game in your field, and it still will take you time to learn new tools and systems. It's the same thing if you get a new piece of technology or new data or any of that within your own internal company. So it just takes time. And I think, again, allowing yourself to have that time is crucial, but also meeting people where they are. Some people are, I don't say this to make it sound scary, but some people are afraid of new tools and technology because
Yeah.
they're used to the way they do things. They're worried that they won't get the same things or it'll be so different that it'll take them so long. So, meeting people where they are and talking to them about what their concerns are, and then talking them through it and helping them understand, why the new tool or process or piece of, whatever it is better, or hearing them out, because sometimes maybe they're like very large concerns. If you don't touch that area and they do, they're like, hey, we're trying to implement this, but it doesn't do this thing and you didn't catch that. So I'm
Right.
worried that I won't have this piece of my, a core competency taken care of anymore. So making sure you're
Good.
listening to people.
Yeah, when you talk about evolving company culture while respecting tradition, I know your culture, Tarani's culture, is so tied to its heritage.
Mhm.
How do you evolve that culture without losing what makes it so special?
I love this question. This is core to who we are at Tarani. We talk about culture and who we are and what our company stands for just as much as we talk about the product and everything that we do from the business perspective, because we are a 100-year-old company and there are not many 100-year-old companies that are also at the level that we're at. So I think that for us, really staying, like, we are passionate about staying who we are and we're keeping that culture intact, while at the same time understanding that it's a lot harder as we grow. I think that
Yeah.
one of the ways that we do that is by actually defining what our culture is. I think that sometimes culture is thrown out there as this very like big term, and it kind of like people are like, okay, you say culture, what does that even mean? Is it, waffle Wednesdays? Is it, people like, what does culture mean? So I think having that definition and how the company looks at it is key, because then you have actual like tangible things that you want to keep in place. So for us, we have certain core competencies that we talk about with our teammates. We have certain just ways of working that we all know. We have certain, yeah, there are a lot of fun things that we do too. Like there's a tailgate toss that we do every year, and there's like Halloween is really big for us. So like everyone gets all decked out for Halloween. So there are fun things mixed in with the culture of how we treat each other and how we treat each other internally in business interactions, as well as just when you're in the break room, but also externally. How do we treat our partners? How do we treat our customers? How do we treat agencies we work with? How do we work with people? So at the core of our culture is our people. And that's really key to it. But once you kind of know that, and you're bought into that, it's easier to then apply that over the growth of the company and how large of a scale we can go, because it's not just, I think that when we started growing, people were like, I don't know everyone's name anymore. I can't just turn around and ask this team this question. And I think that there are some parts of the culture that you're going to lose, but some parts of the culture and the bigger parts that you retain, like again, how we treat each other and the people, and how, our owner Lisa and our CEO Melanie both talk all the time, and our whole leadership team talks all the time that we're a people first company. So I think that people first lens is really core to our culture, and that's something that you can have if you're a team of 10 or a team of 10,000. So that's really what we try to stay focused on.
Good. That's a really good answer. Here's the question I've been dying to ask, because I hear this a lot in the e-commerce space over the last numerous years is, our leadership team is so used to the way things have always been. How do you encourage innovation among those employees who may be used to the way things have always been done? I know it's a huge challenge in any industry, but how specifically do you and your team, how do you encourage that innovation?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've been on both sides of it where, I've been the person that's like, no, we do things this way. We like that's not who we are. And I think
Right.
again, it goes back to understanding what the who we are really means, and having that clearly laid out and defined for the whole company so that I think that there is a very large myth or fallacy around the way we've always done things doesn't mean change. And that's not true. Change can still happen and innovation can still happen while you stay core to who you are. So they aren't mutually exclusive. So for us, a lot of the times, things like this is a very obvious example, but our label, we will never change our label. Well, I shouldn't say never. I don't know the future, but I will say that is something that we are fiercely protective over because that is our brand. Like we know that
Right.
people know that even if they don't know the name Tarani, they know our label. So there are certain things like that everyone's bought into, everyone knows. And I think that finding which key pieces of your company are the ones where it's like, this is not going to change, period, end of story. But also understanding change is the only constant. I think we've all heard that before. And if you don't try to go with the change, you're
Right.
going to get, we could all probably name a dozen companies that we know of. They're no longer in business because they weren't adaptable, right? So I
Right.
think Netflix is probably a great example of that, where they started out mailing DVDs in the mail and now they're like the largest streaming platform. So I think it's things like that, if they hadn't been adaptable and if they hadn't changed, then where would they be? Probably like Blockbuster. So I
Yeah.
think it's all about, again, just understanding which pieces can change and which cannot. And then going back again to the meeting people where they're at, because I think that change can be intimidating to people who have been there for 20, 30 years. And we have a number of people who have been at Tarani for 20, 30 plus years. And so having those people share their experience is really important to keeping that culture in place, and keeping who we are at the foundation of it. But we kind of have a very unique perspective on things because even the people that have been there the longest have still not been there as long as the company's been around, right? So,
Yeah.
like, I think our most tenured person is our CEO, or she's one of them, if not the longest. And so it's kind of like we have our leader who has been through so much of the change, and even she was only part of it at where the company had already changed so much. Like we started out in, the prohibition era during like we had five flavors that were all more focused on like the like like the liquor industry, right? So and the label looked nothing like it looks now. And she wasn't part of that obviously 100 years ago. So there's always been change, and I think that helps a lot of us at Tarani keep our eye on the future. Um, but yeah, just knowing what your core principles are, um, but also having the leadership that can tell people this is like change is going to happen. When I was at Nordstrom, that was one of the best things that I heard from the Nordstrom brothers was, Nordstrom has a very um, strong reputation from hiring from within, and you start on the floor and you work your way up into the buying office and into the leadership, right? So I was not hired like that though. I came in from outside and I got a lot of sideways glances, and people were like, how did you get here if you never worked on the floor? And it was really interesting. But then at one of our all hands or town halls, whatever, like team meetings, Blake Nordstrom actually said, he's like, we have to do things that we've never done before. And people who started at Nordstrom backstocking shoes during the anniversary sale don't know how to run an e-commerce site. So we need to bring people in from the outside. So the leadership had that foresight, right? And and then it came from them like, hey, look, we know that this is uncomfortable. We know a lot of our culture has been only hire from within, but if we do that, we won't be here for the next generation to enjoy us. So I saw it happen with Nordstrom. Tarani is very much the same way, where it's like we're going to keep certain things core to who we are, but we have to evolve and change too.
Right. Yeah, and your brand, of course, is iconic, and maintaining that brand identity through periods of change is very difficult. And if you could kind of describe an opportunity or a moment where the brand was at risk of drifting from its core identity, and how did you bring it back, if you could, if you have an example for us?
I don't have one of that because I will tell you that Tarani is so focused on our brand identity.
Okay, good.
Everything we do is passed through. That's what it was so funny that you asked this one, because everything that we do is always passed through the lens of, is this Tarani? Is this how we would do things? Is this how we want to be represented? Is this how like the brand has gotten to be 100 years old? And is this how the brand will continue for another 100 years? So um, I think maybe some of the things that we've gone through in terms of some of our product innovation have maybe been the closest pieces of that. But like we have a Pure Made line, and the Pure Made line labels do look different than our core line, than our original line. So they're more of like a light yellow, or like a, you know, label. It still has the red band on it,
Hmm.
but it's not the red, yellow, and blue with the castle and everything that everyone kind of knows. Um, so I think people were like, is this still being true to us because it looks so different? So we kept elements of it, or of the old label in the new label, but it's not as recognizable. And we can see that when, on the shelf, people are like, oh, and then they see the name and they kind of relate it back, but it's that label that is key for us. And again, the people-centered culture is like for the culture piece of it. Um, but we have a couple new products that have launched recently that are different, and we do a lot of, or our innovation team does a lot of feedback from consumer testing groups, like, hey, is this something that we feel like is a Tarani product, is aligned with like our gold standard quality flavor expectation that our customers to expect from us, and that we expect of ourselves as well. And if that's not holding true, then we'll scrap it and start fresh. And we've done
Yeah,
that a couple times since I've been here. So but we very much hold true to who we are and what the customers expect from us above all else. Um, so yeah, we won't put something out. We say we are slow to go fast. So we will not put something out or do something if we don't feel like it is aligned with our, like, who we are.
good. Good, yeah, and you talked a couple of different areas about employees or your talent that you work with. How do you showcase your legacy as an advantage to prospective employees rather than a constraint? So some people will hear, "Oh my God, 100-year-old company. It's, not as large as some of the large companies, but they're set in their ways, or they have this type of tradition." So how do you manage that? How do you showcase that legacy as an advantage?
That's a good one. I think that can be really challenging, especially because we're in the Bay Area, is where our headquarters are, and especially when it comes to like tech talent, everyone's like, why would I work at Tarani instead of Meta or Google or Apple, or one of the big ones? So for us, I think a lot of it comes to um, we're we are a very stable company. We've been around for 100 years. We've been in the business for a long, long time, and we're not going anywhere. Like, because of some of the solid, like, foundations that we have, I think that can be a big one, especially in this day and age with so much uncertainty, the job market being a little unstable, tech companies coming and going as quickly as they do anymore. A lot of it is, look, we're a really strong brand. You know us, like I said, you know us, even if you don't know that you know us. We have a fun and exciting product to work on, and everyone has a seat at the table. I think that that's another big one, is that we want to hear everyone's voice. We want everyone's opinion. Um, that won't necessarily always change the outcome, but it's like everyone, I think, feels very empowered to share their perspective, to share their opinions, which you don't get a lot of places. Like, a lot of
Yeah.
places are they're not as, they don't put their people first. They're not centered on that. And so you don't have that opportunity and that experience. So I think that just the stability of our company, the long-standing reputation that we have, the brand awareness that we have, but also the ability, in a lot of ways, it's interesting because we are 100 years old, but we are very new to certain areas of the industry. e-commerce being one of them. So
Yeah.
when I started, I kind of looked at it almost as a ground floor opportunity because I was like, they need people to come and do this, and they've never really had anyone running e-commerce in as dedicated of a way before with as much resourcing behind it. So for me, and for a lot of people, I think it can be that. It can be like there's new innovation happening, even though we're 100 years old. We're solid, we're stable, we're not going anywhere, we care about our people. We really put things forward that I think a lot of companies don't. A lot of companies say that they care about their employees, but then when you get into it, they're a normal company doing things the way that everyone else does it. From the
Right.
second you
Right.
step foot into our building or even talk with anyone at Tarani, it feels different. And that's, again, part of the culture and how we strive to put people first. And so I think people understand that, and that's what draws a lot of the talent that we get is just working for a company that puts their money where their mouth is, walks the talk, and not just, says it. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, you're doing something right.
Yeah,
Being
I
around that
guess
long.
so.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, creating innovative customer experiences that honor your brand history. So being around now 100 years, can you share a recent initiative where you blended Tarani's heritage with a modern customer touch point, whether it was digital or in store? Do you have an example that you could talk about or initiative?
Yeah, so because it's our 100-year anniversary, we were trying to figure out how we will go about celebrating our 100-year in a way that, exactly like you said, felt true to our heritage, but also was modern and fun and really brought in some of the younger customers who, I think a lot of our past or in the past currently too, but a lot of it's been more focused around the food service business where they will like get a latte at their local coffee shop and it's a hot coffee, right? So that's like, maybe Gen X and millennials. So how do we really bring in the Gen Z and younger millennials and even Gen Alpha who are starting to like want to explore and play flavor more than just coffee? So how do we do that? And a lot of our partnerships through some of our really strong partners with our food service teams and coffee shops and stands have been great to help us explore that this year. But as well as that, we did pop-ups. So we had a pop-up in San Francisco at the beginning of the year or towards the beginning of the year in the spring, where we had a whole retail space build out and people could come in and kind of experience the flavor factory and they got to walk in, learn about the history, but then it was a very modern experience in terms of they got to do a touch screen for building their own flavor that was like, are you a fall, winter, spring, summer person? Which colors calling to you the most? And it
Oh,
really
wow.
went from it really made it an interactive process. And then they got to take the cup, their little label was printed out with their customized drink or a drink based on like their prompts. And then they got to like squirt the pumps in and kind of like make their drink. So that was a really fun experience. And then we've taken that in a smaller mobile version. We have now a mobile pop-up truck that's been going all across the country throughout the year. So there was one in New York. We had one in Seattle, which is where I live. I think they were in Arizona just this last weekend. There's going to be one in Texas. And then I think that initially we had just thought to keep it to this year for celebrating our 100 year, but we were like, why not keep going? We're getting great engagement. People are obviously loving this. So a lot of it has been how do we get customers or consumers to not just think about us as behind the counter at their local coffee shop, but how do I use this product in my home in ways that are new and can like and not just in a drink, on my ice cream, baking with it. Like we had a company that uses our vanilla syrup as a glaze on their croissants. So
Wow.
I think it's like, just really helping people and getting people the product in people's hands to try it is a really big way in this last year specifically with those pop-ups that we've been able to kind of like blend both the heritage and the new innovation that we're trying or the new modern take on our company and our brand with some of our flavors too. Like some of our flavors are, we used to have mostly just core flavors in like coffee and fruits. And now we have things like sweet heat where it can add like a little bit of heat, or we have, sour candy. It's a little bit of fun. So, I mean,
Wow.
really, there's like lots of innovation being done on that side of it too. So,
Well, you have to let me know when the snowmobile comes here in February. I'd love to see you guys come here in February in
That's a good
Minneapolis.
idea.
It'd be interesting to see what vehicle you bring.
Yeah.
Um, well, I also want to ask, kind of what you see in the future of retail and customer experience, and how that's evolving for heritage brands like Tarani. So, how do you see the future of retail and customer experience evolving for you?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that we're really focused on right now too. I think again, this goes back to how do you stay relevant and how do you stay, ahead of curves rather than playing catch up. So, um, we started 100 years ago, and then a lot of our growth was in the last 30 years with the boom, or 40 years with the boom of like coffee and kind of, people wanting that to be more of a beyond just black coffee in the morning, their flavored
Mhm.
experience and kind of something, a treat for themselves. So, um, but that's been a lot of the focus has been, again, behind the counter, baristas using it. So, how do we get it back from behind the barista counter and on your home counter? And so focusing on consumers rather than just the operators has been a big key for us. And how do we find all the places that consumers might be that might want our product? So that's what we're really focusing on now and working towards making sure that our flavor is at arm's reach wherever people are so that they can flavor whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. So we're really more positioning ourselves as a flavor company, not just a coffee syrup company, which I think is how most people really think of us, or Italian
Right.
sodas, things like that. So um, that's a big one, but pushing forward into more e-commerce spaces, our D2C is becoming a little bit more interactive. We want to really try and push the envelope with consumer experiences digitally on our own D2C. But also getting in person with that pop-up is going to be hugely important for us. We are part of the Amazon Big Prime Day deals today, so everyone check that. I'm sure everyone's thinking about that today. But just again becoming more accessible to consumers and to retail customers, and rather than staying solely focused on the food service side of the business, which is still hugely important for us, but also growing into places where we can be directly in the hands of the consumer, and have them play with our flavor, discover what they can do with it, share it with their friends, family members, and then come back to try something new. So we're really pushing into those consumer markets on the shelves at every major retailer, in all the e-commerce places you can find us. We're working on the growth there. But, as we've been talking about, it comes with challenges from resourcing standpoints and whatnot. So working through all of that too. But really understanding that Gen Z and Alpha, as they come up, we want to be with them from an earlier point of adoption rather than, in their, I think our key demographic tends to be in their 20s to like 40s. We want to be with them even earlier than that so that they understand who we are and we're a brand that they are loyal to, and that they can carry us through their whole life cycle of like whatever they choose to use flavor for, we're the bottle they reach for.
Yeah, good. Well, I know we're coming up here. We've got another probably 10 minutes. I want to close this out or ask a couple reflective questions for you. So looking back, what's the biggest lesson you feel Tarani has learned in balancing legacy with innovation?
I think it's definitely meeting people where they're at again, so you can kind of bring people along. So if someone is, been one of those people that's been there for 26 years and is worried about letting go of something legacy, either to our ways of working and our tools and systems or the culture, is understanding, it's not just throwing that out, but meeting them where they're at, understanding where they're at, and then bringing everyone along together. So there's a lot of value that comes in legacy and bringing the legacy forward too, but also understanding that the change is coming and will happen. And if you don't embrace it and figure out ways to work with that change, then 100-year-old company can quickly be just that, right? So um, making sure that leadership, that's a big one. Your leaders have to understand that too. And we're lucky that they do. at Tarani and put it at the forefront. There are certain things that I'm like, let me teach you more about this so that they can learn more and they're more bought in and adopting things quicker. But yeah, I think it's not one is not better than the other. The legacy is not old and outdated, and the new stuff is not, oh, that's just a flash in the pan. It's how do you bring both of the good things from both together to continue forward. I don't believe we would have gotten to 100 years if we had forgot all the things from the past. So making sure that that is a core part of who we are going forward too.
Good. Well, my last question for you before we open it up for questions from our audience is, what excites you most about Tarani's next chapter?
Oh man, so much. We're growing so fast right now. We just opened a new warehouse. I think I mentioned that. So before I started, we moved from a location in South San Francisco over to the East Bay. And I like my coworkers tell me, the ones that knew both locations, that when they saw our current building for the first time, they were like, how are we ever going to fill everything up? This is so much space. And within 3 years, we were already like, this is not big enough. So figuring out that and what that means for the future in terms of our manufacturing capabilities too, because currently we manufacture everything in California as well. So there's those pieces of it, but also the consumers and how we know that people, again, know who we are, but don't necessarily recognize us. Or if I had a nickel for every time I met someone and they were like, where do you work? And I was like, Tarani. And they're like, And then I was like, coffee syrups, and they're like, oh, okay, and it starts to click, and then I'll show, like, we have little 50 ml bottles, and I'll sometimes pull one out, and they're like, oh, I know Tarani. So like, I'm really excited to take it from that experience to just saying Tarani and people knowing who we are.
Right.
And the whole consumer part of it, right? That's my job, is like pushing in on the consumer markets and on e-commerce and what that means, how we're going to start incorporating AI more. I think for me, I'm, Chat GPT and if that's going to be monetized in ways in the future, how does that look? And what does it all mean for search and the bots and everything that they're doing? So it's fun to be part of those conversations and figuring that out. Because again, a lot of e-commerce is like, we're all experiencing a lot of this for the first time, right? So it's constantly evolving and new. And Tarani is open to embracing that and really wants to be part of that. So we are around for the next 100 years. So the ability to continue bringing our legacy and the newness of what's coming down the pipeline, and the openness that my company has for that is pretty exciting to be part of. So, and we always have great flavors coming out. I can't not talk about the product. It's delicious. So
makes your job easier, right?
It certainly does.
It does. Well, good. Well, thank you. I'll have Robert kind of open it up for questions. Robert, if you want to bring you back, there you go.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Roger and Stephanie. But the Q&A line is open. If you guys are looking at your screen, you'll see second icon to the right is the Q&A. Throw a question in there if you have something that you want to ask Stephanie or Roger from the information you gleaned from today's webinar. I'll leave it open. And Roger, if you want to keep going or close out, it's up to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again in the end of February, if not sooner again, at one of another upcoming events. But before I end this webinar of awesomeness, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Northern Lights Technology Development. We're a part of Taylor Corporation. Taylor Corporation is a $2.5 billion privately held company based here in Minnesota. We're globally known. And we've been around for almost 50 years. We've continued to innovate and expand into ever-evolving industry-leading provider of print, marketing, labeling, packaging, and warehousing and fulfillment solutions. About 18 years ago, Northern Lights was created under that Taylor umbrella to help innovate and expand into ever-evolving industry for technology, helping with integrations, middleware, websites, etc., mobile app development. And 2 years ago, we decided to start offering our development services, custom app development, externally outside the Taylor organization. We provide staff augmentation, outsourcing information technology, such as I mentioned, custom app development, custom web development, application support, as well as business process outsourcing, such as sales support, collections, chat, email services, and back office operations. So if Northern Lights can help support you in any of these areas, you can contact me directly. Robert will share a screen also here with my contact information, as well as Stephanie. Stephanie's offered if you have any questions you'd like to reach out or connect with her to continue your thought leadership. We'd be more than happy to share that. So unless, Robert, you have any questions that came in?
Actually, I do have one question that came in on the question line. When it comes to refreshing or creating new assets content, how much is internalized versus outsourced? And what advice would you have for a small team to scale up new to the e-commerce vertical?
Yeah, that's a great question too. This is a tough one because I think traditionally a lot of new content creation in terms of especially assets like visual assets have been a lot harder to come by or more expensive, right? So if you are a smaller company, I would say lean in on AI. I hate saying that because I want to keep content creators employed, but at the same point in time, if you don't have the resources, start where you can. And I think that, again, some of that is with AI where you can, or maybe have someone go and like you can do a smaller photo shoot than what you initially were going to do. And then you can take pieces of that into AI and work and have AI kind of expand from that. But I would say that that can help also. We have a small team of internal sources or resources who helps us with a lot of our content creation and whatnot. We do have a couple people who are like aspiring photographers, and so they'll just grab their camera and we'll take some pictures and do a lot of our content creation around the office. We have one gentleman who works with us who's incredibly talented as an artist, so he does a lot of our certain things for us as well. But then from a perspective of, especially if it's not like heavy lift work, we have an agency that we work with that kind of helps us with some of the visual content in terms of just like our A+ content on Amazon. We have assets, like enough assets that she can just then take those, put them together and create the A+. Written content, same kind of thing. So if you're a small company, I would say start by either checking out what AI can do or find an agency that specializes in content creation, because that's probably going to be faster and more cost effective compared to trying to hire someone and bringing that in-house.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. And that was actually the only question that came in. Again, thank you both, Stephanie and Roger, for joining us today on our Northern Lights webinar. Stay tuned, everybody, for future webinars as we come around to the end of the year. I know that we have some conversations coming up as it relates to the transportation industry, and I'm sure we'll have some more about e-commerce, especially with some Shopify implementations and best practices there. So stay tuned. This video will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website in the coming days. And as always, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Take care.